but I'm about to know
All
one.
right. Well, let's jump in here. If you saw us earlier, thanks so much. I'm Scott. Basically, it's all about community, as Cody just mentioned. I'm so appreciative to Emerson Drake, Matt Boley, and Brian Kreutz, like so many people within the HubSpot community to learn and constantly grow. So wanted to just make this a panel discussion and really focus on kind of some of our experiences in RevOps. We've got a really great panel here. I'll let them introduce themselves. Uh, I'm Scott with Squad 4. So we're fractional RevOps and go-to-market team. I specialize in helping scaling organizations in B2B tech and legal services. Uh, Emerson, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I'm Emerson McEwen. I'm the director of revenue operations at Haws Alert. I made a career transition from social work with homeless youth, and moved into tech sales. Worked my way up from an SDR to an AE, and then at some point realized that what I really liked doing was, and what made me successful as a salesperson was my processes, and I love sharing those processes with other folks. Found myself into RevOps, and everything just clicked from there.
Cool. I'm Drake. I'm the founder of Revi. We're a RevOps strategy and consulting business. Before I did this, I wore a lot of different hats in the technical space. So did project management, Scrum leader work for a mobile app development company. Then I worked for Eli Lilly, working on clinical trial data feeds, which is really cool. Worked for a clinical startup that got acquired by Verily, which is an Alphabet company. And through that experience, I ended up starting Revi. And now I'm all focused on RevOps.
Awesome. And I think that's been something that's super consistent among a lot of the RevOps professionals. Like we have multi-domain expertise and have sat in any one of the individual like go-to-market seats and, part strategy, part technical. I don't think we need a presentation for this, so let me cancel that. But awesome. I've got a bunch of questions for us. So really, like, thank you for the basic background. I'll start this one off. It was how do we find ourselves in RevOps? We kind of have a basic of this. I started out in technical writing and like knowledge management, migrated into web design, marketing ops. But I've sat in a whole bunch of buckets, development. But really, like seeing the whole picture is really so important, whether RevOps or whether it's super admin, whatever we want to call the title.
Yeah, I
Should
can
I
jump
go? Go for it, Emerson.
in. Yeah. So I've always been kind of a nerdy one, and always, kind of tech adjacent. But like most of my life, I was in social work, and I ran my own nonprofit. At some point, I made the switch over to tech sales, and I was just really good with processes. And throughout my sales career, there was always someone in leadership saying, "Hey, what are you doing to be so successful?" And when I'd show them, they say, "Hey, can you put something together and teach the rest of the SDRs or AEs or what have you?" Later in my sales career life, I was working for a mega corporation. I'm not going to name names or anything, but their systems were so locked down, and I was so used to working at startups and building my own paths. And I felt so restricted and knew I wasn't going to be successful, given their sequences and all of the things that it was a boiler room sort of situation too. I tried to figure out, how do I build my systems that I know work for me within this megalithic monolithic structure. I actually found that HubSpot would actually connect to the emailing, so I could build my own sequences and get around all of their platforms by connecting through HubSpot, which I'd never used before. And all of a sudden, I'm my name's getting shouted out as being successful, and other AEs are coming like, "What are you doing? How are you doing this?" And I'd show them the workflows that I built out in HubSpot, and they're like, "Hey, can you build this for me?" And so I started doing that. And at some point, I realized, wow, this is really what I want to do. I like this way more than actually, selling to folks. At that point, I looked at what sort of careers existed out there for someone who liked to do that stuff, and RevOps was it. So I made the jump.
I've had so many of those instances too, where like finding the right tool or something that, it's kind of shadow ops. Almost been in a situation where it's like, why am I risking this? And then finding and building an MVP tool that solves for problems more than just for me, but for like multiple teams.
Yep.
Yeah, I love how you fumbled your way into it, basically. I think I had similar story. I was working for a clinical trial startup, as I mentioned earlier. And it was right before COVID hit. So business was relatively chill. It was like, standard good work-life balance. And then COVID hit and things just completely hit the fan. And it was fascinating being at a startup that was at the right moment at the right time, right? COVID hits and all of a sudden we're at a clinical trial startup and our business just completely takes off. And so there's multiple ways that you can go about scaling a business that is really starting to gain a lot of traction. You can obviously invest in systems and automations, or you can make your employees work more and, kind of invest more, I guess I would say, in manpower, hiring and all that stuff. And we kind of did the latter. So, found myself working 40 hours and was just, or I'm sorry, went from 40 to 70 hours a week and really getting frustrated with like, why are we not investing in systems and automation and our operations to help us streamline and scale everything that we need to do to get done. And really through that experience, I was just like, you know what? I feel like I had no idea what RevOps was at the time, but I was like, I feel like there is a business opportunity here where if I can help businesses with process and automation, that would be a good idea. So I started this, got into HubSpot, and then through that, RevOps really started to blow up, like say a little bit afterwards, and I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. Like, but very
Yeah.
similar, just kind of found myself there.
And sustainability is all of it, right? How do we build systems and processes that help scale? Someone in the organization who's an architect is thinking about what's that roadblock we're going to hit. Like someone who's working 50 to 70 hours a week over and over again, that's not going to work out for anyone.
No, absolutely not.
But to that point, there are all kinds of challenges in RevOps. Emerson, what would you say, like what are the biggest challenges? And then I know for this panel, like you're working internally for an organization in this role, so you have your whole cognitive load to focus at one organization, whereas Drake and I have a few clients. But yeah, what are the biggest challenges?
Yeah. Well, RevOps is probably unique in any company where they need to understand kind of everything about the business from and both on like a macro scale and a micro scale, right? So it's this constant balance between strategic and tactical. And a lot of times it's an under resourced department. I mean, I hear all the time about RevOps pros who are kind of being a single person or a very small team, an under resourced team, really trying to solve all of the I don't want to say all the problems in the organization, but really it touches every single department. And you have kind of a lot of bosses. You have a lot of people that are asking you things constantly, and it can, the constant context switching can be a challenge. And so if you don't have good systems in place, RevOps is a very challenging, rewarding, but very challenging career path.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say from an alignment standpoint, from our perspective, right, where we've got a lot of different clients, um, from what I've seen, if there's not that alignment from the leadership down, and it really needs to come from the CEO, that can align marketing, sales, service operations behind the RevOps function. I think that's absolutely critical. I've been in situations where maybe I was hired from the COO or I was reporting up through the CMO, and marketing is not on the same not on the same page as sales or service or whatever it might be, and the CEO is obviously aware of what's going on but is not really driving that alignment. You can find yourself in a pretty tough situation, and not as effective as you should be in really changing the overall business function, being able to drive it forward.
absolutely. I'm one of those systems people, right? Got to have follow the process. Like, of course, there's creative freedoms, but having particular intake systems, and then just building alignment among the leadership team. We need that because it's a constant nurture and support for everyone in, and it's one of those things where we need to solve root causes. Otherwise, the symptoms can distract from what the core problems are. But uh, so with that, like I think those are great. But Emerson, what do you think makes a great RevOps?
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you're saying, RevOps at its core really needs to have great partnerships with each of the department heads, right? Uh, you need to have folks who kind of, you're not in charge of them necessarily unless you're the CRO, but you really need to be able to build really healthy, strong relationships. You need to be able to build trust. you also have to have really strong technical capabilities. And a lot of times, I think those things aren't it takes a special person to be able to possess both, right? Really good at the technical aspect, really good at the people aspect. And you can't, I think anybody who's just okay at either of those things is, that doesn't make them great. I think you have to be good or great at both of those things at the core. So,
It's going to be a struggle, but I know I've been through
yeah.
that, and I'd say straight up, you're far more technical than I am. Like I'm scary enough with code, and then with ChatGPT, it gives me tools, but yeah, you can't do all of it as one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if in my opinion, if you have to choose one or the other to be stronger at, you got to be really strong at the people skills because, you can hire for, an admin or someone who has the technical ability, but, you'd struggle if you don't have good aligning, communication and good people skills.
And building those partnerships because you can lean on, product or dev or engineering to help with
Mhm.
certain aspects. How
Yep.
about you, Drake? What do you think?
Definitely data and system governance, sound documentation across the board, making sure that you understand if you change something here, what is the downstream effect? What is the upstream effect of that? So like for us, every time we build anything, obviously, and Matt Bullion, I think, talked about it at the beginning of being able to draw pictures, right? Like you got to be really good at the process mapping. You got to be really good at data governance, understanding just everything that's going on. It makes everything's so much easier from building, right? When you've got everything laid out, you got it all designed, you've got it reviewed, you've got it approved. Then when you go to build, you've got your blueprint. It's right there. It's very easy to just make those changes and build everything out. It's like, building a house, you don't just show up and just start throwing up the house. Obviously, you've got the blueprints, you've got everything has been approved. So I think the data governance, the documentation is really important. It also makes QA super easy. Like for us, we've got everything laid out, and then as we test, like we're flagging it. All right, this is green, this is red, it failed. This is yellow, it worked sometimes, but not all the time, whatever it might be. It's also great for adoption, right? A lot of people are visual learners, sales people are visual, marketing people are visual. If they can see how everything is working together, if they can see how lead routing is working, it makes adoption a lot easier. And then from a support side, it's really great from, troubleshooting, diagnosing issues. I can't tell you how many times I get Slacks from people being like, Drake, what's going on with this automation? Can you tell me like all the different automations that we're using for creating tasks? Yeah, absolutely. I've got it literally right here. We can jump on a call now. I don't have to do any research or analysis to figure out what's going on. So I think, yeah, sound data governance, sound system governance, all that documentation is critical. And the last part of it is if you ever leave the business or if you scale a team up underneath you, it makes it so much easier to just hand those things off because the whole system is documented extremely well. And I think that's extremely valuable.
It also makes our jobs easier because helping educate and make sure that those resources are just available helps everyone ask better questions and understand how the system's working. I know Chris in the main group and Profoundly would agree with you. Like we've talked, and he focuses on like data model and hygiene like, as another topic. Like automation is dangerous. Like we need to be able to build processes and things that can be done manually. That's the system. They're the foundation that we build automation onto, so that it scales effectively. Awesome. Uh, we've talked about documentation. We've talked about a few of these things. What are some of the other things, Drake, that you do just to set yourself up for RevOps success beyond the documentation and those process?
The very first thing that I do with my clients, like this is quite literally after we do introductions on the kickoff call, we immediately go into goals. I need to understand what their goals are overall for the business, not just business goals, but also revenue goals, marketing goals, sales goals, service goals. I want everyone all on the same page so that as we start building out their platform strategy, their RevOps strategy as a whole, we all are aligned on, okay, we sat down at that first kickoff call and we talked about the goals. We're all aligned on that. So when I go to present the strategies to them, it's very easy for me to get buy-in because, we'll come out and say, all right, here's the roadmap. This is what we're going to do in month 1, month 2, month 3, et cetera. Here's our quarterly, annual goals, all those things. It makes getting that buy-in really, really fast. I would say like 99% of the time when I sit down for that like final roadmap call before we really start building everything, there's really no questions because everyone is completely aligned and they understand why things are slotted the way that they are because of, we already went through the goal process and it's just easy to get that alignment. I think that was like CC asked that earlier in the session, like how do you get started when a company is really new to RevOps and you're building it up from the ground? Like I think that's kind of the answer as well, is make sure that you really understand what the goals are because then you can prioritize off of that so much more effectively. Yeah, so I would say that's like definitely my number one thing for setting yourself up for success.
How about you, Emerson? Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the top, and then the other piece of that is, because we're constantly balancing the tactical, the actual doing, and the thinking, and the strategic work. Really having a system for funneling requests. Uh, Requests can come in from HubSpot mentions, Slack DMs, emails, text messages, phone calls, all this.
Carrier
And just
pigeons.
save yourself so much by just having one source of like a ticketing system or something like that. I have a ticketing system that's Slack based, and then that just, someone can submit a form, goes into my project management, and then I can tackle it when I need to. And then I have RevOps office hours. It's an hour on Monday and an hour on Thursday. People can sign up for that through my calendar, and that allows me to just really focus. Like if I'm working on something technical, I'm not constantly getting interrupted and needing to put out fires and context switching. Or if I need to, have some strategy time, I can block that off and know that I can focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I lean on those things. Yeah, communication alignment goals, just like everything else, like is something that we can go back because it's something we're going to review, in every quarter and make sure that the priorities still line up, probably more frequently, like strategy alignment monthly, syncs and updates on a weekly basis, overall company alignment on a 90-day basis. Um, yeah, and the intake process has made such a big difference, and that for me it helps also just with reinforcing ongoing communication, continuing to build relationships. Everyone needs refreshers because everyone's constantly context switching in this day and age with the amount of content coming at us. I mean, let alone the HubSpot updates, everything that's going on in the industry. And then yeah, and muscle memory, like also building that in and transparency so that those are constantly thought about and tweaked and refined. Awesome. I think one of the big things I mentioned on our slide earlier, and if anybody wants those resources, we'll put up the slide at the end of this. Connect with us, like the RevOps blueprint and those other things, and those mantras. But like this whole concept, especially here in the Profoundly group, like projects versus retainers. And so like I know Emerson, this kind of transitions to more like the HubSpot solutions partner ecosystem. But like I just wanted to share some thoughts on like I did a lot of project work early on, and this points back to Emerson, your point about time management. That was a game changer. Like block out specific dedicated time so you have the space and bandwidth to solve problems. If you're constantly being asked or expected to respond, we turn into firefighters. But that transition between like project-based work and retainer-based work, I think is so crucial and just difficult to manage, right, as you make hard decisions and hard changes. And also, I think there's a place, especially if you're in the HubSpot ecosystem, where you want a balance or a blend of both. So, like, kind of making those initial decisions. I know, like, I used to take a lot more project work. I'm thinking new HubSpot implementations. I'm thinking lead management and pipeline. At this point, kind of for our business, I'm a solopreneur really, but I have a number of consultants that we work with and HubSpot admins that I will, give specific pieces when they're super specialized in something for integrations or a specific process. But mostly I'm reinforcing like your CRM is changing, HubSpot's changing it so fast. Like this is really an ongoing continuous improvement. If I drop like the cache of how your business is set up and the overall view for 3 to 6 months and come back, it's a tremendous workload to say, what's going right, what's going wrong, how has your team changed, all of those pieces. So I know I keep a maximum of 2 to 3 clients on retainer at any given time because I think it's a struggle to do like any more than that, and even 3 is too many. But like we need that surface area and time to really understand. So much of the quality of like RevOps or admin work comes from ongoing iteration, really understanding a process, boiling it down to its simplest form that gets the best data and the most value out of it, and still entertaining those projects that really niche and fit into like to my target market, so that when new either implementations for organizations that are transitioning come in, or specific things that I feel confident that okay, we can touch and re-engineer your a lead pipeline or management tool within the scope of your whole revenue engine. That's not messing up like overall success and like the synchronous kind of view of the whole company. Um, Drake, I'd love to kick it over to you. Like what I know that you've kind of made some of those decisions too over the past few years.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just critical from a mental health perspective, to be honest. Like, when you're living in that project-based world, I mean, I did that for my first year in business. I would say pretty much everything was project-based. I would have incredible months, and because I had no focus on, building out my pipeline because I was too busy doing all the work, I would then go through like famine months, right? Or weeks or whatever it might be as I'm waiting for new projects to close. And then all of a sudden, like one week you close, I think once upon I maybe closed 6 or 8 projects in one week. And it just all happened all at once. And you're like, oh, like, like
And then it's not
this
done.
is
Then support and adoption comes in.
exactly. And it's just, and then, so it just, I don't know, from a mental health standpoint, I think moving away from projects into retainers was critical for me. In order to do that, I went to all of my previous clients. I went to anyone that I was doing in like an ongoing project with. And then of course I had some clients that were continuing to come to me. Those ones were really easy to turn into a retainer. That one, I just basically went to them and said, hey, this is on average how much, time I'm working with you guys. This is what I think makes sense from a retainer. Those ones were really easy to retain and convert. I honestly lost a lot of the individuals though that were project-based, purely project-based. And so in the immediate and the short term for my business, it was definitely a negative, if you will. I think I lost greater than 50% of revenue for a short period. But when I got out of that and was only taking in retainer clients, my business was able to scale so much more efficiently. I was able to finally standardize my process and my work. So, again, when you're doing project-based work, I feel like you're doing so much custom stuff all the time. But when you can finally get people into a retainer and you can really start to standardize your process from a scaling business perspective, like I think you have to figure out how to get there. And if you are going to do project-based work, I think to the points that you brought up, I think that criteria makes a lot of sense. And I would also say if like take on anyone who you think might be a good candidate for a retainer, maybe their project is kind of in that realm and you feel like you can convert them to a retainer in the future, they understand the importance of long-term growth. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I did it and my experience with transitioning.
I have so much respect because that is such a hard transition. I do still think like those projects are super important, whether it's a project or a long-term retainer.
Yeah.
Like the initial calls help you have those friction-filled conversations, like put hard lines on like here's how we need to build systems so that it's sustainable. Uh,
Yes.
but
Agreed.
but like
Very
that
much agreed.
transition, a lot of things are right for the very near short term. Like I think holistically, right? Very near short term, it often hurts up front, but we know
Yeah.
we're building towards
So
something.
worth it.
And that's also
So worth
why
it though.
data government, yeah, and all those other things are
Yeah.
so important. So you can say, okay, we might experience a dip, but really like we've committed to this for a 90-day or at least a period of time where we can measure it and see what does that translate to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it just insulates you, I think, a little bit more in the future once you do start to get a healthy group of retainers. I had a client get bought out, and great news for them, but not great for me because the company that bought them, they cut me. And so, but I was able, it was totally fine. I just had to find one more retainer, and we were maxed out again. So it made that transition so much easier in the long term.
And I think the hardest part is the commitment. Once you've done that, then your brain kind of starts switching and says, okay, like I'm only taking on customers that fit within the industries or the sales motions and those types that I know that I'm a really good fit for. And so
Yeah.
like, yeah, the relationships, the systems that, even the things we've built, like I find those are so much more rewarding.
Mhm.
Just a housekeeping item. We got about 3 minutes, but yeah, Emerson, I'd love to hear from you too.
Well, I'm coming from a completely different perspective, but the value that RevOps can bring, like if you're thinking about retainer versus project, I mean, one of the core tenets of RevOps is to remove silos. Project work is a siloed as a in its function, in its nature. What one of the somebody at the company I work for calls me the revenue oracle because I can usually predict about 6 months ahead of time what's the problems that we're going to have, and if they're not fixed now, we're going to have those problems. And so, and as I've gained more confidence, I can say, hey, we need to fix this. Let's get on it. But earlier on, it was just, hey guys, this might become a problem, and then sure enough, 6 months down the line, it did. And that's a hugely valuable to a company. And so if you're thinking about project versus retainer work, the more that you can build that trust with your clients, the more that you can, you're just providing more and more value to them. The longer that you stay on, the knowledge that you guys have from working with so many different clients and seeing businesses operate in so many different ways, it's immensely valuable to be bring that consultation and guidance.
That's one of the things I appreciate more than anything, right? Is not sometimes I don't have the surface area or haven't had it with those individual companies, but literally seeing dozens of different organizations and what businesses are doing and how they're changing their sales model or what tools they're helping, give their sales folks. And then just to that, like I've had sustainable revenue for at least several years. And I think so much of that is like do great work for those specific clients you work really well with. And I've had plenty of them say, "Oh no, like we did an implementation and we did this project." And I'm like, "It's time to think about long term. Like, let's get you this so that we can build those resources, whether it's me or a small team, like geometrically leveling up rather than scaling like an organization that focuses on RevOps. Like have a couple of professionals, but like some of them have left and come back after 6 months or a year. It's like these things are yeah, it's a product. We're going to keep iterating on it. Your team's going to change and having that confidence to say, here's what we're building for so that you can project the future.
Yeah. Businesses are always changing, their teams are always changing, their systems are always changing. So having that ongoing RevOps resource, I think, is so critical. If you're going to
Absolutely.
successfully be able to grow and scale your business and stay efficient and lean as you do it. Otherwise, I think you're going to be going through a very like bumpy ride
And
as you,
helping their internal resources adopt some of the initial infrastructure and things you put in place. Like that's just another
Mhm.
way to help coach or build retainers. I know we've got about 30 seconds, so we'll get kicked out. It's so great. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any questions, please hit us up on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
and happy to share any of the resources that we had up there, or just have a conversation. Like it's so much of it's community, and I've learned so much from you too.
yeah, likewise. Yeah, definitely connect on LinkedIn if anyone wants to chat or ask any follow-up questions. Scott, thanks so much for putting this together and inviting us to do this. It's been awesome.